The drums thundered through the palace halls like a war cry, each beat echoing Amora's racing heart. She stood at the altar draped in silk and gold, her hands trembling beneath the weight of ancestral jewelry. The crowd of nobles watched with eager eyes as her suitor, Kwame, stepped forward with a predatory smile. But then she saw it through the gap in the ceremonial curtains, in the chamber beyond. Her blood turned to ice. Kwame stood over a bound servant, his ceremonial dagger glinting as he laughed with his companions. The servant's terrified eyes met hers for just a moment before Kwame's blade found its mark. This was no ritual sacrifice, this was cruelty for pleasure. The drums crescendoed, but all Amora could hear was the servant's final gasp. Her vision blurred. Her heart shattered like clay against stone. Without thinking, she ripped the golden veil from her head and hurled it to the ground. No! She screamed, her voice cutting through the celebration like lightning through storm clouds. The palace fell silent. Every eye turned to her as she gathered her robes and ran. The crowd gasped in collective shock. Behind her, Kwame's roar shook the very walls. Find her. Bring her back. Guards flooded the palace grounds like ants from a disturbed hill. Amora pressed herself against the cold stone wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Footsteps thundered past her hiding spot in the garden shadows. Search every room. Check the stables. The princess cannot have gone far. Princess. The word felt like chains around her ankles. She had never wanted the title, never wanted the arranged marriage that came with it. And now, having seen Kwame's true nature, she would die before returning to that altar. When the guards moved on, she slipped through the palace like a ghost. Her bare feet found every hidden path she had explored as a child. The servant's entrance. The gap in the outer wall. The darkness beyond the palace lights. She ran barefoot into the unknown night, her wedding dress trailing behind her like the wings of a broken bird. In the shadows behind her, something moved. A figure detached itself from the darkness and began to follow her steps. The sun rose like a bleeding wound across the sky as Amora stumbled into the village market. Her golden dress was torn and muddied, her feet cut and swollen. Exhaustion weighed her down like stones. The market was already bustling with early vendors setting up their stalls. The smell of fresh bread and roasted corn filled her nose, making her stomach clench with hunger. An old woman with kind eyes and weathered hands looked up from arranging vegetables and gasped. Child, what has happened to you? Amora collapsed beside the woman's stall, unable to speak. Here, the woman whispered, wrapping a rough shawl around Amora's shoulders. You cannot wear such finery here. It will only bring trouble. With gentle hands, she helped Amora out of the tattered wedding dress and into simple brown cloth, the rags of a peasant. There. Now you are invisible. Amora became a seller of fruits, taking refuge behind baskets of mangoes and plantains. But even as she settled into her new life, whispers began to spread through the market like wildfire. Did you hear? The bride has vanished. They say she ran from her own wedding. Days blended into weeks in the market. Amora's hands grew rough from handling produce, her back ached from bending over baskets, but for the first time in her life, she tasted freedom. She was arranging oranges when a shadow fell across her stall. She looked up to see a man with gentle eyes and calloused hands. He was tall but not imposing, strong but not threatening. Good morning, he said softly. How much for the mangoes? His voice was like cool water on a hot day. Amora found herself staring longer than she should. 3 coins for 6, she managed. He selected the fruit carefully, his fingers brushing hers as he handed over the payment. I'm Oba, he said. I work in the carpenter's shop across the way. Kesai, she lied, giving him the name she had chosen for herself. Day after day, he returned to her store. Always polite, always gentle, never demanding more than she was willing to give. But she noticed how his eyes lingered on her face, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle. Why did he look at her like he knew her secret? In his palace chamber, Kwame swept everything from his table with one violent motion. Goblets clattered to the floor, spilling wine like blood across the marble. 3 weeks, he roared at the assembled guards. 3 weeks, and you have found nothing. The captain of the guard trembled. My lord, we have searched every. Silence. Kwame's hand went to his dagger. She is a princess, not a ghost. Someone is hiding her. Someone is helping her. He strode to the window, looking out at the sprawling kingdom below. Somewhere out there, his bride, his property, was defying him. The thought made his blood boil. Double the reward, he said coldly. Send spies to every village, every market, every hovel. I will have her back. He turned to face his men, his eyes glinting with malice. And when I find who helped her escape. He smiled, and the guards shivered. They will beg for the mercy I showed that servant. The spies rode out at dawn, spreading into the villages like a plague. Amora woke with a scream caught in her throat. In her dreams, she was back at the altar, watching Kwame's blade rise and fall. But this time, she was the one bound and helpless. She sat up in the tiny room above the bakery where she had found lodging, her heart hammering against her ribs. Moonlight filtered through the cracked window, casting shadows that looked too much like searching figures. What if he was already near? What if her hiding place had been discovered? The next morning at her store, she jumped at every unfamiliar face, flinched at every raised voice. When a well-dressed stranger approached her stand, asking about a young woman, very beautiful, who might have come here recently, her hands shook so badly she dropped a basket of plantains. I'm sorry, she whispered. I don't know anyone like that. The stranger smiled, but his eyes remained cold. Of course. But if you should remember anything. He placed a gold coin on her counter. There would be more where that came from. As he walked away, Amora's blood turned to ice. The hunt had found her village. The next day, Oba appeared at her store earlier than usual, his arms full of wooden crates. For your fruit, he explained, setting them down. The old baskets looked ready to fall apart. His kindness made her throat tight with unshed tears. When had anyone ever cared for her comfort without wanting something in return? As the morning progressed, they walked side by side, arranging produce in the new crates. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same mango, and neither pulled away. You're afraid, Oba said quietly. I can see it in your eyes. Amora's heart stopped. I don't know what you mean. Someone hurt you. His voice was gentle but certain. Someone you're hiding from. She wanted to tell him everything, the wedding, the murder, the endless fear. But the words stuck in her throat like thorns. I can't, she whispered. He nodded as if he understood. Then I won't ask. But Kesai. He touched her hand briefly. You don't have to face it alone. That evening, as she was closing her store, she noticed the stranger from yesterday watching her from the shadows. But when she looked again, he was gone. Had someone driven him away? Kwame's spies returned to the palace like vultures to carrion, each carrying pieces of information. A fruit seller in the eastern market, one reported. Young, beautiful, appeared suddenly 3 weeks ago. Another villager spoke of a woman in rags, but with the bearing of nobility, added another. Kwame listened to each report with growing excitement. The descriptions were vague, but they pointed to the same conclusion: Amora was hiding in the eastern villages, probably disguised as a commoner. Clever girl, he murmured, almost admiringly. But not clever enough. He stood before his assembled men, his voice cold as winter steel. Bring her back alive, he commanded. Hurt her, and you'll answer to me personally. But anyone helping her. His smile was sharp as his blade. They are fair game. The captain swallowed hard. And if we can't find her, my lord? Kwame's expression didn't change. Then don't return at all. Amora couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed to hide an enemy, every stranger's glance felt like a trap. When Oba found her crouched behind her store, hands shaking as she sorted fruit, he knelt beside her. "Who are you running from?" he asked gently. The question hung between them like a sword. She looked into his eyes, those kind, patient eyes, and almost broke. "I can't tell you," she whispered. "Can't. Or won't. Both." Tears threatened to spill. "If I tell you, you'll be in danger too." Oba was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her trembling hands in his steady ones. "What if I told you I might be able to help? What if I told you I'm not as helpless as I seem?" She looked at him sharply. There was something in his voice, something that made her wonder if the gentle carpenter was hiding secrets of his own. But before she could answer, a child ran through the market shouting news that made her blood freeze. "Soldiers coming. Soldiers from the palace." Her eyes betrayed everything, the fear, the recognition, the desperate need to run. Oba saw it all. That night, Amara was gathering the last of her belongings when a shadow fell across her doorway. The spy from the market stood there, no longer pretending to be casual. "Found you," he said with a cold smile. "Princess." She grabbed a fruit knife from her table, her hands shaking. "Stay back." He laughed. "Did you really think you could hide forever? Kwame has been very patient, but his patience has limits." He lunged forward. Amora slashed wildly with the knife, catching him across the arm. He cursed and grabbed for her, but suddenly another figure burst through the door. Oba moved like lightning, his carpenter's hammer connecting with the spy's skull with a sickening crack. The man crumpled to the floor. "Are you hurt?" Oba asked, checking her over quickly. Amora stared at him in shock. The gentle fruit buyer had just fought like a warrior. "We need to move," he said urgently. "If he found you, others will too." As they slipped out into the night, one question burned in Amora's mind: who exactly was Oba? Oba led her through dark alleys to a hidden room beneath the carpenter's shop. It was larger than expected, furnished not like a servant's quarters but like a lord's study, with maps, books, and weapons mounted on the walls. "This isn't a carpenter's workshop," Amora breathed. "No," Oba admitted, lighting a lamp. "It isn't." The villagers began to whisper the next day. Where was Kesai the fruit seller? And how had gentle Oba overpowered a trained soldier? Some said they'd seen him move with the fluid grace of a nobleman trained in combat. "No ordinary man could stand so strong," the old women murmured. Amora found herself looking at her protector with new eyes. The way he carried himself when he thought no one was watching. The quality of his supposedly simple clothes. The ease with which he defeated the spy. "Who are you really?" she asked one evening as they shared a simple meal in hiding. Oba's smile was sad. "Someone who understands what it means to run from a life he never chose." But he didn't answer her question, and Amora realized she wasn't the only one carrying dangerous secrets. They sat by a small fire in their hiding place, the silence comfortable but heavy with unspoken truths. Amora watched Oba's face in the flickering light and felt something crack open in her chest. "My name isn't Kesai," she said suddenly. He looked up from the stick he was whittling. "I know. You know. I've known from the beginning. Princess Amora, daughter of the Eastern Kingdom, betrothed to Lord Kwame." His voice was gentle, without accusation. "The question is why you ran." She told him then, about the wedding, about what she'd seen in that chamber, about the blood on Kwame's hands. Oba listened without interruption, his face growing darker with each word. "He's a monster," she finished. "And I was supposed to bind myself to him forever." "Not anymore," Oba said firmly. "I won't let him take you back." They were leaning closer to each other when hurried footsteps approached their hideout. A breathless village boy burst in. "Oba, sir. They've posted notices in the market. A reward for the runaway bride, enough gold to feed a family for a year." Amora's heart sank. How long before greed overcame loyalty? The reward notice changed everything. Suddenly, every interaction felt dangerous. Villagers who had once smiled and chatted now watched her with calculating eyes. "She brought this curse upon us," some whispered. "Soldiers and spies, all because of her." Others were more direct. "Why should we suffer for her troubles? The reward could help all our families." Amora barely left their hiding place, but she could feel the suspicion growing like a fever. When she did venture out, conversation stopped abruptly, and eyes followed her every move. Oba found her crouched in the corner one evening, tears streaming down her face. "They are going to turn me in," she whispered. "I've brought nothing but trouble to these good people." "Not all of them feel that way," Oba assured her. But she could hear the worry in his voice. That night, he returned from the market with grim news. "I overheard men talking. They are planning to expose you tomorrow when the soldiers make their next sweep." Amora closed her eyes. She was trapped between her monster of a groom and people desperate enough to sell her to him. "We need to run again," she said. "No," Oba said firmly. "We need to end this." The next morning, Kwame himself rode into the market square. But he wasn't dressed in his usual fine robes and golden ornaments. Instead, he wore the simple brown cloth of a traveling merchant, his hair hidden beneath a common cap. Amora watched from their hiding place as he dismounted and began moving through the stalls, his cold eyes scanning every face. Vendors approached him eagerly, hoping to make a sale, unaware they were speaking to the very predator they feared. "Have you seen anything unusual?" he asked each one. A young woman, perhaps not quite what she seems. His gaze swept over the fruit stalls, lingering on each one. When he reached the spot where Amora's stand had been, he paused, his head tilting like a hunting dog catching a scent. "This stall," he said to the vendor beside it. "Who worked here?" "A girl called Kesai," the man replied nervously. "But she's been gone for days." Kwame smiled, an expression that never reached his eyes. "Kesai. How creative." He straightened, his voice carrying clearly across the market square. "I know you're here, my dear. I can feel you watching me. Why don't you save everyone the trouble and come out?" The promise in his tone made Amora's skin crawl. "I will find her." Amora's breath came in short gasps as Kwame's eyes swept their hiding place. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows, but there was nowhere to go. Then Oba stepped out into the market square. "You there, merchant," he called out loudly. "Do you buy furniture? I have some fine pieces I need to sell." Kwame turned, his attention momentarily diverted. "I'm not in that business, friend." "Oh, too bad." Oba moved closer, positioning himself between Kwame and their hiding spot. "I was hoping to raise money quickly. My wife is with child, and we need to move to her mother's village." It was a perfect lie, exactly the kind of domestic problem that would bore a nobleman like Kwame. Amora watched as Oba engaged him in tedious conversation about wood types and market prices, drawing him away from her location. But she could see the suspicion growing in Kwame's eyes. He wasn't entirely fooled. "You seem very protective of this area," Kwame observed casually. "As if you're guarding something." Oba shrugged. "Just trying to make a living, like everyone else." Kwame's smile was sharp as a blade. "Of course. Well, I should continue my search. But I'll be back tomorrow. And the next day. For as long as it takes." The promise hung in the air like a curse. "I will find her." That evening, safely hidden again, Amora could no longer hold back the truth. "I was forced into that marriage," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. My father arranged it when I was still a child. They said it would bring peace between our kingdoms. Oba listened intently as she described years of dreading her wedding day, of being told that her feelings didn't matter, that duty was everything. I tried to accept it, she continued. I thought perhaps Kwame would be kind, or at least tolerable. But then I saw him kill that servant. He shuddered. The way he laughed. The pleasure in his eyes. I realized I would rather die than bind myself to such evil. Oba took her hands gently. You did the right thing. Marriage should be a choice, not a chains. But what I saw that night, that's not the only reason I ran. She looked into his eyes, seeing only patience and understanding. But she still couldn't bring herself to voice the rest of the truth, that Kwame had made it clear what he expected from their wedding night, and that his appetites extended far beyond the merely political. Some secrets were still too dark to speak aloud. The betrayal came from an unexpected source. Mera, the baker's wife who had given Amora her first kind word in the market, appeared at their hideout with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. My youngest is sick, and the medicine cost more than we make in a month. The reward money. Behind her stood 3 of Kwame's soldiers. There she is, Mera said, pointing with a shaking hand. The runaway bride. The soldiers moved forward, but Oba was already in motion. His hammer caught the first one in the knee, dropping him instantly. The second he tackled, sending them both crashing into the wall. Run, he shouted to Amora. But the third soldier was quicker, grabbing Amora's arm before she could escape. She twisted, remembering her training from childhood fighting games, and broke free just as Oba's fist connected with the soldier's jaw. They escaped into the night, but barely. Behind them, Kwame's voice echoed through the village, search every house. She can't have gone far. In the darkness, approaching footsteps multiplied like demons. Oba led her to an abandoned shrine in the hills, a place so old and forgotten that even the soldiers wouldn't think to look there. They huddled together in the darkness, listening to the distant sounds of the search. We can't keep running forever, Amora whispered. I know. Oba's arm tightened around her. But we'll find a way. She must have dozed, because suddenly she was back at the palace, standing in that chamber of horrors. But this time, Kwame saw her watching. This time, he smiled and beckoned her forward. Come, my bride, he said in the dream. Your turn. She woke screaming, and for a moment couldn't tell if it was real. Kwame stood in the door. But neither of them believed it anymore. Dawn brought no comfort. They sat in the ruins of the ancient shrine, and Amora finally told Oba everything, not just about the murder she'd witnessed, but about the other servant girls who had disappeared from the palace, about the screams that echoed from Kwame's chambers at night, about the fear in every woman's eyes when his name was mentioned. He's not just cruel, she finished. He's evil. Pure evil. And my father wants to bind me to him forever. Oba's face had grown darker with each revelation. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. I swear to you, he said finally, his voice carrying a weight she'd never heard before, he will never touch you. Not while I draw breath. There was something in his tone, not just protectiveness, but authority. The voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed. That afternoon, a messenger bird arrived with news that made Amora's blood freeze. Kwame had discovered that someone was helping her, someone the villagers called the carpenter's apprentice. He knows about you, she whispered to Oba. Oba's smile was sharp and not entirely pleasant. Good. Let him come. It was a small thing that gave Oba away, a signet ring he wore on a chain around his neck, hidden beneath his shirt. When he moved to strike their fire, the chain caught and the ring swung free. Amora saw it clearly in the firelight, the crest of the Western Kingdoms, with a crown above and a lion below. Your nobility, she breathed. Oba's hand went to the ring, but it was too late. Yes. Not just nobility. That's the royal crest of Ashanti. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, Prince Oba of Ashanti. Third son of King Kofi. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. You're a prince. A prince who ran away, just like you. His voice was bitter. My father wanted to arrange my marriage to a woman I'd never met, for political alliance. I couldn't do it. The villager's whisper suddenly made sense. His fighting skills, his natural authority, the quality of his hidden possessions, all of it pointed to royal blood. So you've been lying to me this whole time? No more than you lied to me. His eyes met hers. We are both refugees from the lives others chose for us. But even as understanding dawned, Amora felt a cold fear growing in her chest. If she couldn't trust him to tell her the truth, could she trust him with her life? I left the palace 5 years ago, Oba continued, his voice heavy with old pain. I was supposed to marry a princess from the northern kingdoms, a political alliance my father desperately needed. But I couldn't bear the thought of a loveless marriage, of being trapped forever with someone I barely knew. Amora listened, seeing her own struggles reflected in his story. So I faked my death during a hunting expedition and came here to live simply. I wanted to find out who I was when stripped of title and wealth. I wanted to find real love, not political convenience. He looked at her with such intensity that her breath caught. And then you appeared in the market, and I knew. Knew what? That I'd found everything I'd been searching for. The confession hung between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she was ready to cross. A prince who had given up everything for love, it sounded like a fairy tale. But fairy tales weren't real, and trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. How do I know you won't betray me too? She whispered. How do I know you won't decide that turning me over to Kwame is worth more than whatever you think you feel for me? The hurt in his eyes was answer enough, but before he could respond, shouts echoed from the valley below. The search was getting closer. Kwame had had enough of games. He rode into the village square at the head of 50 soldiers, his patience finally exhausted. I know she's here, he announced to the gathered crowd. And I know someone has been helping her. You have until sunrise to produce both the princess and her accomplice. If you don't. He gestured, and his soldiers began dousing the market stalls with oil. We'll burn this village to the ground and everyone in it. The threat sent panic through the crowd. Parents grabbed their children, merchants frantically tried to save their goods, and everyone began looking around for someone to blame. It's not our fault, an old man cried. We don't even know where she is. Then find out, Kwame said coldly. You have until sunrise. In their hiding place in the hills, Amora and Oba heard the commotion and saw the smoke from the soldiers' torches. I have to go back, Amora said. I can't let innocent people suffer for my choices. That's exactly what he wants, Oba replied. It's a trap. Then what do you suggest? Oba was quiet for a moment, then looked at her with grim determination. We end this. Tonight. At sunrise, she will be mine again, but not in the way he expects. As dawn approached, Oba made his move. He strode into the village square, no longer hiding his noble bearing. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of royal blood. Villagers of Kumosi. I am Prince Oba of Ashanti, and I claim protection for Princess Amora under the ancient laws of sanctuary. The crowd gasped. Kwame's eyes narrowed with interest rather than surprise. A prince, he mused. How fascinating. But you have no authority here, boy. This is my territory now. Is it? Oba smiled grimly. Check your maps. This village lies exactly on the border between your lands and Ashanti territory. By law, I can offer sanctuary to anyone fleeing persecution. Other villagers began to gather behind Oba, not all of them, but enough. The baker who had given Amora shelter. The old woman who had clothed her. Even some who had earlier spoken of turning her in now seemed moved by the prince's courage. "Stand with us," Oba called out. "Stand against tyranny." But Kwame laughed and drew his sword. "Pretty words, Prince. But I think I settled this the old way." As steel rang against steel, the confrontation erupted into chaos. The groom raised his sword high, its point aimed directly at Amora's heart as she emerged from hiding to stand with Oba. The duel was swift and decisive. Kwame was skilled, but he was also arrogant, used to intimidating opponents rather than facing equals. Oba, trained from childhood in royal swordplay, was his match and more. When Kwame overextended in a dramatic thrust meant to show off for the crowd, Oba stepped aside and struck. Kwame's sword went flying, and he found himself on his knees with Oba's blade at his throat. "Yield," Oba commanded. But Kwame's arrogance proved his final downfall. Instead of surrendering, he pulled a hidden dagger and lunged at Amora. "If I cannot have her, no one will." The crowd gasped, but Oba was already moving. His sword took Kwame through the heart before the villain could reach his target. As Kwame fell, something spilled from his traveling pack, jewelry and trinkets that the villagers recognized. Tokens from girls who had gone missing from surrounding villages over the years. "Monster," someone whispered, and the murmur was taken up by the crowd. The truth was finally exposed before all. Kwame was not just a cruel lord, but a killer of innocents. Even his own soldiers looked sick as they realized what they had been serving. "And now," Oba said, turning to Amora, "you must choose. Will you return to your old life, or choose love in humility?" Amora looked at the crowd of villagers, at the soldiers standing uncertain without their master, at Oba waiting for her answer. Then she looked down at Kwame's body and felt only relief that his evil could spread no further. "I choose freedom," she said firmly. "I choose love." She turned to Oba, no longer caring about titles or kingdoms or political alliances. "I choose you." They were married 3 days later in the village square, surrounded by the people who had become their true family. Not in a palace with fanfare and politics, but under the open sky with joy and celebration. Oba used his royal connections to ensure Amora's safety. Her father, horrified by the truth about Kwame, formally released her from all obligations. Together, they chose to stay in the village that had sheltered them, using their combined resources not for personal luxury but to help others. They built schools and hospitals, protected other runaways, and created a sanctuary for those fleeing forced marriages and cruel masters. The fruit seller's store became a symbol of hope, proof that even those born to wealth and power could choose to live with humility and purpose. Years later, when their own children asked about their love story, Amora would smile and tell them, "True wealth is not in gold or pride, but in hearts that dare to love." And the village elder, now ancient and wise, would nod and add, "And so, the runaway bride found what she had truly sought all along, not escape, but destiny."